Hello, Steve White, Steve White 89. Well, I finally watched the first season of the Doctor Who revival from 2005. Now, I thought I'd seen this season, but I attributed some things from later seasons to this, like the Angels, which weren't even in Christopher Eccleston's series, just because of how memory works. I had sort of seen a few episodes in the later seasons and just sort of attributed them, put them all to the first season, which I had tried to watch, but I don't think I saw the whole series, all the episodes. But I can see what they did, but some of it really didn't work, and I'm kind of surprised at some of the things they did do. Now, before I get to the whole review, feel free to share and like my video, and maybe go to the channel and actually look for some of my videos, because YouTube will not be promoting them, otherwise you'll never see them. But that said, wow, Doctor Who had such a bad reputation at the time in the 2000s. It had been cancelled in 1989, and the BBC, who had received a lot of backlash from fans, had spent the last 15 years trashing the show and the fans to sort of justify cancelling it in the first place. The people involved, the executives involved, just hated Doctor Who, and they just really didn't even hide it. And it's shocking to watch old interviews now and see what they were saying about the show and the fans and how they treated their most profitable franchise. It's just unbelievable. I really feel for the Whovians and that 15 years, those wilderness years they had to live through. But finally, just all of a sudden, they got a new series. The show was revived with a budget, and it looked good. And the first images that we got of Eccleston as Doctor Who, it was very much, this is not your grandfather's Doctor Who, and they were trying to go for a really relatable, harder-edged, sort of more detective sort of looking, contemporary, relatable Doctor Who, rather than the sort of old stereotype, sort of pompous, Doctor Who, which is sort of the image. And like I said, the image had taken a real battering. It was seen as like a kid's show and really cheap and lame, and people just mostly made jokes of it now. There was a whole generation of people who had been raised with Doctor Who as this old joke. So they really had a hard time doing the revival on one level, but they could have achieved just as much just by putting whatever actor they went with in contemporary clothes and doing a photo shoot, because it really was just the image of this new Doctor that, managed to sort of separate it from the old image of Doctor Who. But then they went right back to so many of the elements that made Doctor Who not so great in the last years. They did rely a lot on comedy, and they made it a lot for kids, and I was really shocked by that. I thought this season was deliberately a lot darker and more serious to counter that, and that the sort of campiness was something that crept back into the show over time, but it was right there from the first season, and I'm really shocked. And part of me is glad they sort of kept true to what Doctor Who was on one level, but they could have improved it and gotten rid of some of the elements that they still need to get rid of, that Russell T Davies is just clinging to at the moment. That's a whole other video. But so the best thing about the series was Billie Piper. Her character of Rose was relatable. We start off seeing her perspective, and we're taken into Doctor Who with her. Now, they've done this with other companions before, but they just weren't as realistic. And once they sort of left their world, we never sort of saw their world again, and they just sort of disappeared at the end of the season. Whereas Rose kept going back to Earth. We kept seeing her mother and her boyfriend. We saw that she had a life, and it was easy to relate to her and her life and her family. And that's probably the best way to treat a companion that's ever been sort of shown in Doctor Who. And I think she was what really sold the series, oddly enough. And Eccleston was very just superficial, because he had this darker backstory, and he wasn't as fun as the other Doctors, but the show itself was just as camp and kiddie as the other series, which really shocked me. Like, they've got, aliens who are hiding in human skin suits with literal zippers on their foreheads, and passing gas and making fart jokes, and a lot of things that I just was really shocked by. And some of the elements that could have been scary, like the mannequins coming to life in the street, which was really disturbing in the original episodes, I thought. They managed to make kind of camp, and just, they sort of took the edge off it by softening it for the kids, is how it seemed to be, for the kiddies. And they really pandered to the kiddie element of the show, which I'm really surprised that they did, because they were sort of doing this series in response to shows like Buffy and Star Trek The Next Generation that took science fiction and horror and fantasy seriously, and they wanted to create a Doctor Who to compete with that, because that was what they were getting in from the US, that their shows were competing with. So I'm surprised that they sort of went that route, and I think that's something they sort of made a mistake with, because I can't imagine watching a lot of these episodes again. A couple of them are really good, but the rest, it was just, they were just really kiddie, and I was just like cringing through some of it like badly. But overall, I enjoyed the production and the stories, but the tone was still too soft and too kiddie, and I was really surprised by how some things went. Now, I knew Eccleston left after one season, but I didn't know it was for backstage reasons, behind the scenes stuff. And that sort of messed things up. They had this big launch, and he was expected to stay for at least a few years, and then he was gone in a year. And, that created quite a few changes for the next season. But I'm going to go. Feel free to share, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you thought. I'm about to do a review of the second season, because I have watched that, and I've just gotten into the third season. So I waited till I had at least a bit of perspective on Eccleston with Tennant's season before I sort of commented on Eccleston's series.